Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zone. Welcome to this channel. My name is Ogbanje Joseph. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel as well as like and share the video as well. This morning, we are going to be, this morning, this afternoon, this evening, depending on your time zone, we are going to be talking about the theory of international relations called realism. The theory of international relations called realism. Realism as a theory is one of the traditional theories in international relations. Okay, the theory actually emerged in the 1930s, as a reaction to the idealist, school of thought, because the idealism as a theory, failed to address the problem of war, particularly the Second World War. Okay, so now let us look at the concept. Let us try to conceptualize or demystify the word realism. Now, the word realism is gotten from the word real, and the derivative of it is reality. So the word realism is gotten from the word reality. Okay, now it is actually based on facts. Okay, it is fact leading. Okay, so international relations, and this theory has its root, okay, in looking at the human nature as being bad. The human nature has been bad. So now if you extrapolate it to the international system, it can actually be seen that just like human beings are naturally bad and selfish, that is how nations within the international system are are bad, because they are selfish. And so what actually bogged the minds of states within the international system is just their national security, national power, and all of that. Okay, so those are just the major things. Now, what are the basic assumptions? What are the basic assumptions of realism? What are the basic assumptions of realism? Now, the first assumption of realism is that state is the principal actor in the international system. State is the principal actor in the international system. What does this mean? This means that other bodies exist, such as individuals and organizations, but their power is limited. In fact, for them to actually act in the international system, they need the input of in fact, they need the state, okay, as the primary drivers of foreign policy and, of course, international relations. Okay, so that is number one. Number one is that state is the principal actor in international relations. Number two, state is a unitary actor. State is a unitary actor. This means that the state is unitary because the national interests, especially in times of war, that lead the state, makes the state to actually speak as one and act as one as well. What does that mean? It means that in the international system, when states are actually talking, okay, they are talking as states. They are not talking as, as the centrifugal forces that they have within the state, okay, but they are talking as a centripetal force, which means they are talking as one. Okay, they are talking as one, irrespective of the cleavages, irrespective of the differences that exist within a state. Once it has to do with international relations, states must exist, must act and speak as one. That is number two. Then number three, states are rational actors. So before foreign policies are formulated and enacted, there are think tanks that must sit down and look at the pros and cons of these foreign policy. Now, if the foreign policy is actually to the interest of the state, it is formulated and implemented. So we are actually looking at the fact that decision makers are rational actors, in the sense that rational decision making leads to pursuit of national interest. So whatever is done at that level is done from the think tanks level. There are people who sit down and look at the advantages and disadvantages of these policies and programs, or foreign policy for the state. Okay, so that is number 3. Then number 4, within the hierarchy of international issues, national security tops the list. Within the hierarchy of international issues, national security tops the list. Okay, what does that mean? It means that national security is one of the major focus, okay, of states in the international system. So says the realist theory. Now, let us look at the factors that give rise to the realist theory. What are the factors that give rise to the realist theory? Now, the factors that give rise to the realist theory is the fact that, of course, first and foremost, that the idealist school of thought was not able to actually stop the occurrence of the Second World War. And so because of that, you have some issues that have actually taken place, or some events that have taken place within the international system that made scholars of international relations to start having a redefinition to the idealist theory. So realism is a critique of idealist theory. Okay, and realism came up because of some reasons. And what are the reasons? The reasons are the events that took place, and one of it is the rise of Hitler and his aggressive policies. The second is the invasion of Ethiopia by Italy. Okay, the third is the Japanese aggression in China. We have the Germany and the unplanned emergence of the USSR. And then between 1939, this climaxed with the political outbreak of the Second World War. Okay, so looking at all of these trends, now the realists began to argue that power could not be used as dreamt of by the idealists. Power off. Okay, they said that there were laws of political behavior by nations, and one of such laws is that states are always seeking to increase their power or to maximize it. Okay, and if this is true, then nations must perpetually be in conflict, because that is how it is. They then concluded, that is, the realists now concluded, that conflict is unavoidable in the international system. Okay, because conflict and the struggle for power characterize the international relations. Okay, so they also look at it from the perspective that idealism is not actually the major, it should not be reckoned with that much, because according to them, the pursuit of selfish national interests is actually the focal point of idealism, of realism. Okay, now let us look at various perspectives of various scholars within this theoretical framework. Okay, now according to the realist school, human nature is that of selfishness, an insatiable quest for power. So as such, extrapolating it to the international system, okay, now Machiavelli stressed in his classic The Prince, written in 1532, that the leader's primary concern in the international system should be the promotion of national security. And in order to do that, okay, in order to do this, according to him, a leader needs to be alert and cope effectively with internal as well as external threats to rule. So he needs to be a lion and a fox. Now, what does a lion do? A lion is brave. A lion fights. A lion actually, tear other animals to pieces, provided his interest is actually, is met. And what is the interest? The interest is actually to devour other animals and eat to his satisfaction. Then what is a fox? A fox, don't forget that a lion does not detect traps. A lion does not detect traps. Okay? And then what is a fox? Fox is regarded as the wisest animal, okay, in jungle. The reason being that, of course, they are the ones that actually detect, traps. They are very intelligent, very wise, and very smart. Okay, so according to Machiavelli, that a leader must actually possess these qualities of a lion and a fox. Now, as a lion, you have to be brutal to your enemies. You have to actually, as a state in the international system, in your foreign policy making and decisions, you have to, any country that shows you friendliness or that wants to be friends with you, you have to actually give such country carrot, give the country a pat on the back, and then have very good relation and rapport with such country. But any country that actually wants to go against your interest, you have to be brutal towards that country. Okay, and you have to give that country stick. Okay, that is where the theory of carrot and stick actually comes into play. Okay, another perspective to this theory is Hans Morgenthau. Okay, according to Hans Morgenthau, in international relations, actions of states are in line with the primacy of national interest or power over morality. And then he still argued that every political action that states take in the international system is directed towards keeping and increasing or demonstrating their power. Okay, now in the thinking of Morgenthau, politics should not be based on idealism, because idealism can actually make a state to become very weak and possibly the destruction or dominance, of the state by the competitors. So if a state actually wants to go by way of idealism, such a state will become very weak within the international system. So national power, national interest, and for countries to actually stay very relevant in the international system is what is the interest of the realist perspective. Okay, so the realism actually, okay, now Morgenthau summarizes that the pursuit of power explains the way states actually behave in the international system, because according to him, might is always right. Okay, and states are not concerned about morality, but what defines states' behaviors and actions within the international system is what is known as national interest. National interest. No wonder America can actually go to Iraq and take out Saddam Hussein, and nothing will happen to it. Even in as much as international law frowns against, internal interference, undue interference into the territorial integrity of other nations. Okay, no wonder the United States and the Western allies can actually go to Libya and take out Gaddafi, and then nothing will happen. Okay, so those are the things. Now, so those are the things. Now, let us look at, so now the realists believe that the basic essence of international relations is for states to realize their national interest. And to achieve this, states must acquire overwhelming military power and sustainable national wealth. the only rational way to strengthen national interest of a state is to strengthen her national mechanism or balance of power, or balance of power. Let us not forget that what is important to the realist is national interest, national power, national wealth, and to strengthen the national mechanism, or what will actually lead to balance of power. They are in favor of polarity. There should be bipolarity, multipolarity, and all of that. Power within the international system should actually be balanced according to them. So they are in favor of balance of power. Okay, so instead of talking about collective interest, they are not interested in collective interest. They are interested in national interest. So the interests of states are actually within their nation. So, but what are the critiques? What are the major criticisms of this theory? The major criticisms of this theory is that within the international system, everything is not just protection of national interest. Okay, everything is not just protection of national interest. States cannot exist on their own. They need other states to actually exist very well, because no nation is an island. Every nation actually needs other nations. Okay, so to that extent, that theory is actually critiqued from that perspective. The second perspective is the theory of collective national security and collective security. Don't forget, you can't do it on your own. Okay, if you have, for example, Nigeria that has Boko Haram problem, okay, Nigeria is actually looking the way of other African countries, forming a multinational joint commission in order to fight Boko Haram. So your national interest alone is not enough. You also need collective interest. You understand? So the next one is, they are not in favor of international organizations. But whether I like it or not, international organizations are actually very important, because that is where countries gather or come together to actually discuss their issues of common concern. Okay, so to that extent, the criticism of of realist theory is actually, and another criticism is the fact that realist theory is in favor of war. To war is better than to judge. In fact, might is made right. So you cannot build your economy and then after some time you come back again to destroy it. In fact, according to the tenets of realism, if you want peace, you have to be ready for war. If all countries are ready for war, it will actually lead to another global anarchy. And once you have anarchy, what you have is actually international, or global warfare, global conflict, and all of that. That may be too, too big for the globe to actually manage. Don't forget that, realism is actually in favor of war, and war does no one any good. Okay, but what is the application of this theory? The application of this theory is that within the international system, we have seen that during the Cold War between 1945 to 1991, there is actually the practice, that is where you have the practicality of realism. Because, of course, what the Western powers were doing was to actually build their military base, all the countries are actually very much interested in their national interest. And then they came together, all the Western countries came together to talk about forming, a larger state, which is the Western countries, that is the Western Bloc, to actually fight against the Eastern Bloc that is actually championed by the USSR, by Russia. Okay, so what is there? Is that, yes, the Cold War was actually war that was fought short of physical confrontation. But of course, you found out that between that 1945 to 1991, the tension that was actually within the international system was actually very overwhelming. It was overwhelming. So between 1945 to 1991, what existed as at that point is actually realism in operation, realism in practicality. Because at the end of the day, the Western Bloc and the Eastern Bloc were actually at daggers drawn, and they were directly opposing themselves ideologically, militarily, economically, and otherwise. Okay. In fact, there were proxy wars, there were alliances and counter alliances. All of these were actually, the operationalization of what? Of realist school of thought. Thank you very much.